What was Putin's intention in the war? Not the propaganda that's written about this. Oh, that they failed and he was going to take over Ukraine. The idea was to keep NATO, and what is NATO? It's the United States, off of Russia's border. No more, no less. When the Soviet Union ended in 1991, and an agreement was made that NATO will not move 1 inch eastward. Now, what happened after 1991, the United States decided there would be no end to eastward enlargement of NATO. And the decision was taken formally in 1994, when President Clinton signed off on NATO enlargement to the east, all the way to Ukraine and into Georgia. So the NATO enlargement, as you know, started in 1999 with Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic. And Russia was extremely unhappy about it. But these were countries still far from the border. So the next round of NATO enlargement came in 2004. With the 3 Baltic states, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovenia, and Slovakia. At this point, Russia was pretty damn upset. So as everybody recalls, in 2007, President Putin said, stop, enough. And of course, what that meant was in 2008, the United States jammed down Europe's throat enlargement of NATO to Ukraine and to Georgia. This is right up against Russia. And Russia protested because if Russia decided to have a military base on the Rio Grande or the Canadian border, not only would the United States freak out, we'd have war within about 10 minutes. And a month later, a war broke out. That gets Georgia destroyed. And starting in 2010, the U.S. put in Aegis missile systems in Poland and then in Romania. And Russia doesn't like that. In 2010, Viktor Yanukovych was elected on the platform of neutrality. Russia had no territorial interests or designs in Ukraine at all. What Russia was negotiating was a 25-year lease for Sevastopol naval base. That's it. Not for Crimea, not for the Donbass, nothing. In 2014, the U.S. worked actively to overthrow Yanukovych. Everybody knows the phone call by my Columbia University colleague, Victoria Nuland, and the U.S. Ambassador Peter Piot. Listen to it. It's fascinating.
I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea. I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience, and, fuck the EU.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make...
You don't get better evidence. Then came Minsk, and especially Minsk II. It said there should be autonomy for the Russian-speaking regions in the east of Ukraine. It was supported unanimously by the UN Security Council. The United States and Ukraine decided it was not to be enforced. There were many thousands of deaths in the shelling by Ukraine in the Donbass. And one of the issues on the table in December 2021, January 2022, was, does the United States claim the right to put missile systems in Ukraine? And Blinken told Lavrov in January 2022, the United States reserves the right to put missile systems wherever it wants. So the war started. What was Putin's intention in the war? It was to force Zelensky to negotiate neutrality. And that happened within 7 days of the start of the invasion. Ukraine walked away unilaterally from a near agreement. Why? Because the United States told them to. The idea was that there would be Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Georgia that would deprive Russia of any international status by blocking the Black Sea. And the American senators, who are as nasty and cynical and corrupt as imaginable, say this is wonderful expenditure of our money because no Americans are dying. It's the pure proxy war. And since the U.S. talked the negotiators away from the table, about 1 million Ukrainians have died or been severely...
Context and timestamps on the entire Zelensky press conference so you can form your own opinion. Now, here's mine. I watched all 50 minutes. Zelensky let his pain derail peace. I understand why he's emotional. He's watched his people suffer at the hands of Putin for 3 years. But he's a leader, and leaders need to choose between their pain and their people's peace. This was a public press conference. It was a chance for him to show Putin that he can make peace with a man he hates. It was a chance to show the American and European people that he's going to use our tax money to end the war, not extend it. Instead, for 50 minutes, he called Putin a terrorist and a killer. That's not how you bring an opponent to the table. He interrupted and contradicted Trump. That's not what you do to an ally that you need. He demanded that Russia pay for everything. That's not how you stop fighting. I don't know what's going on in Zelensky's head, but his actions aren't progressing peace. Now, let's say Zelensky is totally morally right, that Putin is completely wrong and the bad guy. Well, here's the ugly truth. Putin is also the stronger guy. He's got nukes, and morality doesn't end wars. Efficacy does. Now, as for Trump, did he lose his cool at the end? Yeah. And for 39 minutes, he kept composure. He diffused Zelensky's lack of composure with humor. He didn't buy into Zelensky's pessimism that peace with Putin isn't possible. He didn't take Zelensky's bait by condemning Putin, because condemnations win votes, but they don't stop bombs. For 3 years, Biden and European leaders have told us about how good they are and how bad Putin is. How has projecting the moral high ground helped the people on the ground? What has it gotten us? Hundreds of thousands of people dead. Hundreds of billions of dollars spent. No end in sight. Biden stopped talking to Putin. Trump is talking to Putin. And the media says Trump is cozying up with dictators. You tell me, how do you create peace with a dictator you won't talk to? I'm sick of politicians who would rather sound good than do good. I saw a Trump who reality checked Zelensky. And if I were Putin, that's a leader I would make a deal with. That's a man I wouldn't cross once that deal was signed. Zelensky has spent 3 years garnering sympathy on podcasts, social media, and in the press. It has not stopped the killing. In life, in conflict, we must all choose. Would I rather feel right or be effective? Zelensky can make arguments or make peace, but not both.
I was looking around social media today, and it struck me that a lot of people who like to start wars are suddenly very angry with one guy who wants to stop this war. And there are people who have taken us into one disaster after another, war in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, who have spent much of today on social media attacking Trump. What we're seeing, I think, is a reset of geopolitics, a reset. We're seeing the breakdown of what you might call the international liberal world order, which saw 20, 30 years of one foreign policy disaster after another. And Trump, I was at the inauguration in America, and people around the president are basically saying, they've had enough of that constant interventionism. They've had enough of Europe, by the way, again, maybe a controversial point, but Europe not paying its way on defence. And they've looked to Germany, they've looked to France, they've looked to Italy, they've looked to the UK, and they said, what are you guys doing? Take Germany as an example. Germany under the Greens, absolutely bonkers, becoming more dependent upon Russia because of its ridiculous energy policy, becoming more dependent upon China, and then turning around and criticising Donald Trump when he says we've got to end this war. I mean, I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense anymore. There are two things that need to happen. One is, Ukraine obviously needs to be involved in the negotiated settlement, that's obvious. But the second key point is this now has to be a line in the sand. After this negotiated settlement, Europe is going to have to pay to defend itself. We cannot just rely on America, because understandably they're saying, look, we've got China, we've got our problems on the border, we've got to revitalise our economy. So I think for everybody who sat there criticising Donald Trump, I do think we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and think, actually, are we getting this right here in Europe?
And to the point that a number of